afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us one more time. I know we're going to be together a few more times before our task is completed. So just wanted to go over today. First, let me share with all of you that Commissioner Russell Tucker is going to be joining us a little bit late today. She was called into a meeting last minute, and she definitely sent her regards. But she will be joining us during the meeting. So we're going to go ahead because we have so much to do today. We are going to go ahead and start. So just for those who's joining us in right now, just wanted to reiterate that Commissioner Russell Tucker is going to be joining us a little bit late. So we are going to go ahead and start the meeting. And then when she joins us, we will go ahead and do the pieces of the meeting that she needs to do. So to start today, you all received the agenda and a couple of versions of the information that we are going to be doing today. So I'm just going to go ahead. The meeting objectives for today is to review and provide feedback on the draft Connecticut standards for remote learning, to engage in work conversations and discussions related to your group assignments. And then we are going to be identifying next meeting date, topics, and potential guest speakers and other topics that you might like to discuss. So today is pretty much a working session. So thank you for those of you who were sent the survey, completed the survey that it was sent. So you were not required to do that, but thank you so much. Some of you already sent it. And if for those of you that would like to actually take a look at it and provide your feedback, that will be great. And today is your opportunity as well to give feedback to the standards. As the agenda indicates, we're looking for you to really take a look at the standards and then provide information so that our colleagues of the department can actually use your feedback to review the standards. You will going to be receiving today some updates regarding how these standards came to be. I don't know how many of you have the opportunity to go through all of them and some of the history that was provided in the document, but you begin to gather. But today, Irene is going to walk us through some of the specifics about it. So that is the agenda for today. So some of the things that we need to do now, we are going to do the roll call. So Maddie or Leslie, please, if we can go ahead to do the roll call.
Sure. Afternoon, everybody. Dr. DeBois-Walton.
Yes, I'm on. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Dr. Dumais.
Good afternoon.
Catherine Gabrielson. Catherine Gabrielson. Okay, Michelle Levy.
I'm here.
Thank you. Fran Rabinowitz. Fran Rabinowitz, I think she had mentioned she had a conflict. Dr. Evelyn Robles Rivas. Dr. Robles Rivas. Okay. Lon Seidman.
I am here and in the car, so I might be popping on and off.
Thank you. Roseanne O'Brien Vocek.
Hello.
And there's Fran. Ed Klonowski.
Here.
Thank you. And Fran, I know we see you just signed on, so I got you on the roll call.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Doug Casey. I see you trying to unmute there in my corner of my screen. Amy Wiltsey. Amy Wiltsey. Okay, Kate Diaz. See her down there too.
I'm here.
There you are. And Lauren Mancini Averett.
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tim Larson.
Good afternoon. I'm here.
Great. That concludes that.
Thank you so much.
And I see Amy's checking in too, so I will update the roll call.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So we are going to leave the acceptance of the minutes to where once the commissioner comes in, so she can go ahead and put that item forward. So the next item that we are going to be addressing, we're actually going to go directly into the content of our time together, because one of the sections of today's agenda, the majority of the section is going to be about you working on your small groups and beginning to go through the to the standards. So at this time, I'm going to ask Irene Parisi if she will not mind sharing some of the information regarding how do we get to this point with the standards. And Irene has been directly involved in the process. Irene?
Thank you, Ingrid, and good afternoon, Commission members. So yes, I have the privilege of sharing an update on the Connecticut Standards for Remote Learning. I did want to provide a reminder of our why the standards. So as outlined in Public Act 21-2 in Section 391, we were to develop standards, which we have a preliminary draft of. And through this now deliberate engagement process with multiple stakeholders, we will update as necessary. And then these standards will be used to inform the remote learning environment design at the local level for boards of education and school districts to provide for remote learning for students in grades 9 through 12, commencing in the fall or for July 1 of 2022. And I did also want to highlight that for this remote learning environment, as designed by the local boards of education and school districts, those remote learning sessions in alignment with these standards would count as an actual school session. So how did we get here? So you helped inform the work that has been shared with you, the conversations that we have had around the state work on the national side, as well as different focus groups that were actually happening parallel to the commission meetings that included multiple educators in varying roles, as well as students. I was able to meet with the CAS CIAC Student Advisory Board to hear from them. We also looked at the national standards that have been published for a number of years, which were also shared as a cornerstone of the design and work with Florida Virtual Virginia, and with TECA. We also went back to the assets that we currently have in place in the department, such as sensible assessment practices and the plan for reimagining Connecticut classrooms for continuous learning. We revisited the thought exchange survey that took place last year of what the students were sharing with us from their voice to say, if we were to do this again, please consider these components. And we also went into the guidelines for alternative education settings to help inform structure and the type of language that would be required to create the best possible guidance and standards for local boards of ed and districts. This may not necessarily be our task and purpose for the commission, but we do feel that it's very important that these are before you, as it does intersect in the decisions that we're making going forward. So the design of the standards was deliberate in that we provide domains and a set of correlated related standards. So again, the information from the previous slide and all the different groups helped inform this standards design. And what I provided here is just a brief description of what the domain purpose is. So that really does describe the area of knowledge. The domain overview provides a deeper description that also might provide in certain areas alignment to state guidance, alignment to statute, or alignment to different position statements for the department, as well as state and national research. The standards, it's a standard set of correlated outcomes for each domain, and that will really define what is expected or required of teachers, of students, of the actual course design, and the programs districts choose to use so that they can certainly have students demonstrate their learning relative to each domain. What I'd like to do is explain domain 1 through 8 a little bit more than what's listed here. We landed on 8 domains because it was important to ensure that these were manageable, and all of the information, all of the research was distilled down into these key 8. Again, based on what we were hearing as need and really balancing the need for standards and benchmarks with flexibility. So domain 1 for professional responsibility and community building, this really does describe that this is the responsibility of that local board, the district, and the teachers to create a very supportive online community. Domain 2 for digital citizenship, social emotional learning, and personal skills highlights our ongoing commitment to developing those digital citizenship skills and really equipping all learners, the adult and the students, in an online environment with skills to interact in that environment and really communicate. Domain 3 for online curriculum and instruction really speaks to the course content and that program that is chosen and what the required instructional moves may be. This really speaks to creating a high quality program and content. Domain 4, slightly different than Domain 3, but this speaks to the actual teaching and learning of that content and really speaks to effective planning for an online environment. Very similar to the best practices that are already in place in an in-person situation. So we wanted to highlight that and show how they also live in an online environment. Domain 5, we heard loud and clear, how do we engage learners in this experience? So this domain really outlines the required conditions for learner engagement. And this really speaks to the teacher and the technology and the integration of those tools to ensure that students or all learners are engaged. Domain 6 for online assessment really speaks to the monitoring progress of a remote learning environment. This domain also builds upon those assets, as I mentioned, of the department, including best practices that we know are viable for assessing learners and their outcomes. This also outlines important local policies that need to be in place to allow for in-person opportunities to demonstrate the learning. So it's not just online assessment, but the ability to pivot when you need to come on campus to participate in that assessment. Domain 7, flexible pathways to learning. We heard this loud and clear. How can we provide for flexibility? So this highlights how to leverage a remote learning environment to provide access and opportunity to multiple pathways to graduation, multiple pathways to demonstrating their learning in this online environment, having choice and voice in this experience. Domain 8 for accessibility and usability really is our commitment to these components for all learner groups, based on their needs, based on their strengths, and based on their passions. What is inherent in Domain 8 is flexibility of the design to meet those needs. It's also important to note in this domain, we also include considerations for access to extracurriculars on campus or even hands-on learning. We learned from students that they really would like to have some sort of pivot lab or pivot opportunity where they can come back to school, even though they're enrolled in an online classroom, to be able to demonstrate their learning in a hands-on environment. This is a visual representation of how the flow of the standards work. So again, overarching remote learning standards, there are multiple domains, and under each are a set of standards. Not each domain is not equal with the set of standards, so you will notice that there might be 17 standards in domain 1, there may be 7 in domain 2, but combined across all of the domains, the 8 domains, there are 94 standards. Ingrid, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because we're about ready to get into our work groups, but just want to do a check-in.
Thank you, Irene. We can pause before we go into the groups to see if any of the members of the commission have any questions specifically to the information that you just heard Irene share.
And just a reminder that we will be in the work group for a significant amount of time, about almost 40 minutes. So Ajit and I will be facilitating as before so that we can actually have that discussion and ask questions and engage domain by domain.
Thank you, Irene.
Mm-hmm.
Kate?
Good afternoon. Just a quick question. How much of this was drawn from the national standards for online teaching?
Good question. Percentage-wise, I would not be able to tell you, but I'll there was a significant amount drawn from the national standards because they had been vetted and gone through a clearing, like a vetting process to get to the point where they are.
Irene, I
but-
just wasn't, I haven't had the chance to look, who vetted them?
So
Is there a national organization or something that this is structured around?
yes, I can provide that information for you. I'll put that into the chat for you, or we can share it within our group. But yes, there was a national organization that reviewed the standards. I just don't have the name off the top of my head. And I would say that after the review process, that information would be included in the set of standards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Kate. Any other general questions for the benefit of the full group before we move into the small group conversations? Seeing no hands up. Okay. So Irene, would you mind? Go ahead.
I just need to pause for one moment because we might have a technical issue with breakout sessions. So just one moment, please.
Sure. So I can give you an anticipation as Irene is preparing for the breakout sessions. The first the first part of your time together in the breakout groups is going to be the first 4 standards. So if you want to begin to browse to them right now as we wait. And I see, Doug, you have a question.
Thank you, Ingrid. Yeah, maybe it's more of a statement. I think as I was looking through the standards earlier, my mind went to the how. These are the what, but the how. And it's a tall order to make all these assurances of how do we have proper supports for students and educators, et cetera. So that's implementing these standards is a whole nother discussion, but I couldn't help but share that observation with everybody else as to getting to this point of exemplary demonstration of these standards is not an insignificant and it will be an ongoing endeavor for any district.
Thank you for that observation, Doug. I can see your colleagues shaking their head in full agreement with you. So thank you for the observation, the how. Thank you. Irene, just double checking with you with the technology. Are we all set?
Yes, and we may have to do a slight change. So Leslie's going to open her mic. For whatever reason, Ajit and I are not identified in the meeting. So we're going to have to change how we break out. So Leslie, if you're ready.
Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send each individual group a calendar invite. So you'll receive in a couple minutes a new Teams meeting link for research and design breakout room. You guys will go there, and then after your 40 minutes, you would return. Same thing for the focus group and development. You're going to receive a calendar invite, go into that meeting link, and then come back to the meeting, the main link, once your 40 minutes are done. Hope that makes sense.
Leslie, thank you so much. Before we do that, before you leave us, I would like to ask Irene, would you be able to put the slide with the name so everybody know which group they were assigned? And if for any reason you do not see your name on the slide, please let us know right now so that we can tell you, or that Leslie can know which group you would like to go to. So if you do not see your name, if you participated in today's meeting and you do not see your name, if you're a member of the commission, please let us know so that we can assign you and send you the invitation for that particular group. Yes, Tim, you can, yes.
I don't see my name.
Which group would you like to join, Tim?
Anywhere you think I'd best fit.
All right, so let's do this. What about if we put you in the research and design?
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for your flexibility. So you will receive the invitation for the research and
Yep.
design.
So while we're waiting for that, I don't see any other hands up. In our discussion, we're going to present 3 questions, and it will be important to look at the domains in sets of 1 through 4 and 5 through 8. So we'll be asking, what do you like about the standards? What might be missing from the standards? And what surprised you? So you can start thinking about that as we get ready to go into our groups. And we'll just wait for Leslie.
Okay,
I just wanted to say hello. I jumped in here. I don't want to stop the progress, so keep on moving. I'll see you when you get back from the breakout session.
So I just sent the calendar invite for research and design, so you guys are able to go now. And now in a couple minutes, I'm gonna have the focus group for the development, for the research group and development.
Thank you, Leslie.
So Matt, I think we're going to pause and then we'll come back in the 40 minutes. Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and start. Hope they will join us. And I cannot begin to imagine the level of discourse that took place in your small groups. And we definitely wanted to hear some of those key aspects of your conversation. But before we do that, I would like to have our Chair Commissioner Russell Tucker, if she will do some welcome remarks, and also just the item that we have pending on the agenda, the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting. So, Commissioner, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ingrid, and great to see everyone. And I'm eager also to hear summary of the conversations that folks have. So I certainly won't take a lot of your time. I apologize for having a meeting that interrupted my ability to join you earlier. But I do just want to go back, as Ingrid mentioned, to have consent to accept the minutes from last meeting. Any changes that we need to make, or maybe a thumbs up if we're good to go, we can just take that. I see thumbs up, right? Thumbs up coming up. All right, I see 2 thumbs up from Fran. Perfect. All right, thank you. So our minutes are accepted, and so we will move that forward. Let me just thank you in advance, and I know folks who are watching. As you know, this work is so critically important to us. I know folks have been asking us, when are these guidelines going to be ready to go? Folks are eager to wait on them, to see them, but we wanted to make sure that we had input and feedback, and that we didn't just develop them here and get them out. It is too important in terms of how it's guiding the work going forward and guiding schools going forward. So we wanted to make sure, number one, that we started with the commission. After all, that's why you're here. You're a great group to provide input. And then the plan is also to get input broader beyond you with a lot of stakeholder groups. And we have a process to make sure that that is happening. So that's where we are. And unfortunately, sometimes when we have legislation around these things, that amount of robust feedback is not contemplated in the timeline. And even though we make the case for that, sometimes we're not always successful in making the argument for the extra time. But again, this was too important not to spend the time to do that. So thank you in advance for your input today, and the fact I know that they've done a Qualtrics document that you can also use to provide even further feedback on it. But I'm eager to hear from you at this point in time. So again, thank you in advance for all this work. Back to you, Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. So with that said, I know that Irene had presented a couple of items that we wanted you to really delve deeper into the standards. You know, some of those things that surprise you the most, some of the things that you agree with, some of those things that we feel that we can provide some feedback. So at this time, I would like to open the space for anyone that would like to just, in general, just share with us some of the insights, some of those surprises, some of those things that you say, yep, it needs to be part of it, that you would like to share for the benefit of the full.
So Ingrid, just to let you know, Ajit and I did take notes in the breakout session, so I could display those and we can talk through those first and then see if there's affirmation or like agreement. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So in the focus group development group, we had a deep conversation, a great conversation, and those key questions of what do you like, what is missing, and what surprised you prompted much more in the discussion, but we also had a lot of lingering questions that are listed here. And
Irene,
some, yes.
Sorry for the interruption. Would you mind making the font just a little larger if possible? I don't know if anybody else is having some issues seeing the print, but.
I will do my best.
Thank you.
Does that help?
That's better. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Great, you're welcome. So, and the group that I was with, certainly you can raise your hand and see if there's something else that I overlooked, but you can see here that first, I want to start with that everyone's excited by the development of such a document and standards, that this is an important moment for us as a department and for us as a commission. What they like about the standards is that might be embedded throughout, that there really is what's inherent, I think, the intentionality, that if you're going to design a remote learning environment, that you have to be very intentional, and it requires so much more, which is where we landed more about what might be missing, is how do we design that remote learning environment that is equitable? How might we differentiate from one course to a whole course of study? Do we need a statement of equity of access to support districts in the design? So that was really, that's where we landed a lot in talking about that, like how does this actually stick at the district level? You can see the questions, because again, it did prompt a lot of questions about extracurricular activities. Is there a conflict? So what does that mean for the design of this at the local level? The programs that districts might choose, do we provide clearer guidance? And really the resources, the level of resources at the district level that need to be made available to ensure that they have the best remote learning environment created in alignment with these standards. So that's where we hovered quite a bit. And certainly what's missing is more about the SEL and not just about digital citizenship and the inclusion of resources and such for multilingual learners, and being very clear on communication and engaging those learners. So I'll pause there for a moment to see if from my group, if there's anything that we wanted to underscore there.
Thank you, Irene.
And then I know Ajit also collected notes, and I can go to your slide, Ajit, when you're ready.
Sure. Thanks, Irene.
I just had a question because the SEL is really important. So could you say more about the SEL conversation that you had, Irene, or others from the group?
Sure. So just really briefly, Domain 2 speaks to digital citizenship, social emotional learning, and the personal skills and developing those. So in the current form, there's not a lot it's more about digital citizenship and not a lot about social emotional learning. So again, going back maybe to the intellectual habits or other components of SEL and weaving those in.
Thank you.
Okay, Ajit.
Sure.
Here you go.
Thanks, Irene. I think in our group, what they liked about it was comprehensive and all-encompassing, sort of like NECHI, NEASC type standards. But that was also a critique, if you will, of the standards, that they're just too many. How can somebody who is new at this get off the ground, start implementing remote learning, and really start at perfection with all of these different standards? And so the tension between how do we ensure that what our students receive is indeed a high quality, well thought out, well planned effort versus, not everybody is at this spot yet and having to work their way towards it. So there wasn't really that much disagreement about the content of the standards. There were some suggestions of what to add there, like perhaps we're not saying enough about student roles and responsibilities and expectations. Perhaps we're not saying enough about diversity, equity, inclusion. And Irene, I know that was a theme in your group as well. And also, how do you identify teachers who are better suited to teach in this environment? Focusing on that, or the advisor guidance piece. So clearly there were suggestions of what might be added to the standards, but we talked a lot more about, there are 94 odd standards. Perhaps what we need is some other sort of layer above it that maybe takes, focuses on the essential elements, sort of like what we do with content standards. Sometimes we prioritize standards and we say, these are the priority standards. Or perhaps teasing out those standards in the 94, 95 standards that are generic to good teaching or to code of ethics or basic instructional elements, maybe taking them out of the priority. I mean, not sort of prioritizing them because they're already understood in terms of what's good teaching, but maybe prioritizing those that are really essential to running a remote learning program in a 912 environment. So I think we spent a lot of time talking about just how extensive this is. And if we really wanted the district to have a good first step, how can we kind of maybe take one step above these standards and maybe sort of pull out from here, what are the absolute essential things for teachers, for schools, for students, and like maybe call those out, if you will. And perhaps for families, like what are the essential things that need to come up? So we spent a lot of time sort of talking about that prioritization piece of it. And also the fact that, there were some specific suggestions and comments as well. We talked about domain 7, where there were some reasons why remote learning might be offered, but it seemed like they were exceptionalities and not necessarily, or special situations, not necessarily your core vanilla curriculum, if you will, if you wanted to do it in a remote way. So I think sort of being clear about what are the purposes for remote learning that we're talking about. So I think in general, the standards are good. They're aspirational. They're what we need to have, but perhaps there's just a lot to work with. And maybe there's another layer that we need that prioritizes them and maybe teasing out ones that are already covered in other standards like Common Core teaching or Code of Ethics or other places where some of these things might be covered. So, and I'm sure my folks in the team will have a bunch to add to what I've said. So please feel free to jump in and supplement with any of your thoughts here.
Thank you to both of our facilitators, Irene and Ajit, for the information and for summarizing the conversation that took place in the groups. Any members from the groups would like to add any other observations at this point? Okay. Seems that we have engaged in a lot of discourse. Oh, Doug, go ahead.
I think in our group, Ed and Tim and Ajit did a really good job of articulating sort of the point that Ajit made earlier, which is these are all important standards, but how do you start to build a series of rollouts or layering, as Ajit said, so that they're manageable and over a period of time you can achieve these. The other observation that came up was just the almost enormity of what's being scoped within these standards points to the need for deep expertise in among teachers and expectations for students. So in some ways it ties over nicely to the development of a statewide remote learning school. That we will need help and deep expertise in doing something like this. It's not something that individual districts could begin doing anytime soon. It's an enormous task.
Thank you, Doug. Kate?
It's interesting, Doug, that you bring it up in that way, because one of the things that our group spent a little bit of time discussing was how remote layers in as a single course offering versus a full program, and that really those two necessitate a slightly different perspective, and figuring out kind of how to flush that out a little bit to differentiate those two experiences, because you would have different expectations. Now, it may be that the standards might have to apply universally, but I think we want to think that all the way through. And then the other piece that we did spend a little time thinking about is, if we're going to purchase a canned program, right, or buy into an already existing school, how does that live with these standards, something that exists outside really our control? And we go to sort of the marketplace of learning. How do these standards potentially accelerate that? Or is that something that we don't advise, because we're worried about that? Like, I think that's a next layer for us as a group. We do have to really contemplate, are we going to endorse, if the program meets these standards, okay, you can sign on to it? Or are we going to say, I don't know that we're comfortable with, outsourcing? And so I think that is a space that we have to contemplate, because I agree with you that I think there's an intense amount of thought and intentionality with these standards. And I really think there's a high expectation that's been placed out there. And so I think we want to think about the consequences of that all the way through as we build out what we believe should be happening.
And I'll jump into both Doug and Kate, and balancing for us, and certainly with your thoughts and help, because the initial use of the standards is really upon us. When we think about its rollout for July 1, 2022, where local boards of education or regional boards may authorize remote learning in grades 9 through 12 based on these standards. And so while we're deliberating, and I know folks are waiting, folks who may be in our viewing audience right now, because we've gotten the questions to say, wait a minute, it's budget season, and we're already thinking about our remote learning, program that we want to put in for high school come now, so it's something to talk through. And I know these standards, we can always say that they're living, and you can always update them. So where is the best? I'm going to say cut point. That's not the right word, but where do we put out there? What do we put out to say at a minimum? And at one point, at a minimum, if you're going to think about the coming school year and having a high school program that must follow these standards, what does that look like? Anyway, so I throw that out, not because I have the answer, but because all of us are grappling with that together in terms of what that means, and how do we evolve the standards that we have. With all the great recommendations that you're making, it's just the one thing in the back of my mind in terms of the rollout to meet that particular timeline.
Commissioner, thank you for that observation. I hear the urgency of getting something to our school districts and LEAs for them to be able to make some decisions. So we have 1 minute left, and we have 2 hands up. So I'm giving you 15 seconds each. Francis and Ed. So Francis, you're first, and then Ed, 15 seconds.
Okay, it'll be very quick. I just want to follow up on what Kate said. I think it's very different to have 1 or 2 courses than it is to have full remote. And I think we have to differentiate there. I also want to say that the districts that I know, and there are very few, maybe 2, that want to provide a full remote program next year, are definitely looking to outside sources. They're not setting it up themselves. And so it's going to be really important to know how they are held to these standards as well. I want to say to you that I think the standards are a giant step forward. They're exciting. And it's very, very good to have these because there was some things going on like credit recovery that did not have these kind of standards. So thank you.
So I have a practical suggestion. The standards are wonderful. If I was a new district and I wanted to do distance learning, this shows me what it should look like when it's mature. But I think you should think of an RFP process. So if you were going to say to a vendor, what do I have to buy your product? So you start with 94 standards and you coalesce. We were talking about an overlay where you've got the 5 or 6 or 10 most important things you have to have. Certified teachers, a high quality technology platform, whatever those 10 or 15 things are, you put those in your RFP and then you ask your provider, whether it's the district or an outside vendor, prove to us you can do these 10 things. And you hold up the 94 and say, by the way, next year we're going to add 10 more. And we're going to go till we've got all 94 established. That's a practical way to get the districts moving forward, I think.
Thank you so much for that. Thinking about the non-negotiables. What are the non-negotiables that must be part of it? Thank you. So it is 4:01. I'm going to turn the floor back to our Chair, Commissioner Russell Tucker, to close our meeting and let us know when our next meeting is going to be. Thank you for all of your feedback. I know that our colleagues at the department are taking all this information to continue to build the information. So, Commissioner?
Thank you very much. And so we have information thank you, Irene, it's got this up. Our next meeting is it Valentine's Day? February 14th?
Yes.
1 to 2. And I think the call tricks you have so you can continue to provide us feedback. One more thing that I just want you to know, we received information from Tekka Connections Academy. That was we all participated, just about all of us in that meeting. They sent us information to clarify some of our conversations that we had at our last meeting. What accreditation and some of the things we talked about. Look for that. I'll have Irene just to send that out to you so you have the response that they provided. It's very short, but at least all the members will have that information available to us. So we will do that. Thank you all so much. I know we could probably spend another half hour with great conversation with so much that we need to talk through. This is very helpful. It's not the end of the conversation. And even though we have a time that we're trying to work through, we also recognize that we still need to continue to have this conversation and bring in other partners, which we will be doing, to hear from our advocates and families as well. I mean, we're really interested and we'll share all that feedback with you. So we're going to get into that as well. Again, knowing that we've got to get this, at least the first phase of this kind of wrapped up and out so folks will have something to work with. So thank you. That will inform our next steps and we will see you next time. Be well, be safe.